Yeah, I sent you an invite to speak, Wolf. I mean, hopefully it's there. That worked.
Interesting. Your invite didn't come through. I'm just sitting here staring and we're waiting. I figured you're waiting for the room to fill, but then again, it's just me, so I'll settle for two. A lot less pressure.
Well, no, fair enough. I mean, this is my first time running a space on my laptop rather than my phone. The last few spaces that I ran under Liberal Discourses, terrible problems with crashing out. So I'm hoping that this holds on a little bit better, but we'll see.
I find that it rotates. Like I had a problem. Like first, I did this all on my PC, which I love because I get to be at my desk and I get a nice big monitor, right? Because I'm getting older and I'm going fucking blind, like all good dogs do. And then I started crashing out all the time. It's like I couldn't figure, like the window, the chat window would keep collapsing and expanding, collapsing and expanding. I don't know if you ever encountered this, and then all of a sudden, the audio's gone. So I'd have to turn off X and come back in. This would happen 3 or 4 times an episode. It was getting ridiculous. Then I installed the app on the PC, so you can do it through your browser or you can do it on an app. And I did it on the browser at first, and then I did it on the app, and it was a little bit better. But when there were more people, like the big spaces, the same thing would happen. So then I'm like, oh God, what am I gonna do? I got a new headset and everything, and I moved everything over to my phone, which alienated the nice new soundboard that I had. And then I tried to figure that out. I still am working on that aspect of it. And now I'm running into issues because they released the Android version of X for Android users, which does not work nearly as well as the generic one that they made. I'm sorry that I up fucking graded because it just made it a lot more complicated. And now it seems the PC version's maybe a little more stable. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, Vanessa. I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine.
I hear you. I hear you. The struggle is real.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this evening. This is the first episode of
Yeah.
Zeitgeist. Yes, the
Yeah, you're
spirit of the
cutting into my
time.
holiday time.
I am so sorry, but I wanted to catch you before you
I'm
really,
kidding.
left.
I'm kidding. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm glad that you've decided to go this route and make this. I've always felt that you've had a lot more to offer the community because honestly, even though you and I are probably ideologically different, um, I would say that you are an upstanding Canadian citizen. I think you are a vested Canadian citizen and a concerned Canadian citizen. What more do you really need if you really have any belief at all or faith at all in democracy left, right? So.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. And Zeitgeist feels like a better fit for me because there's more for me to throw at it, right? When you talk about the spirit of the times, you're now talking about having a wider pool to draw from as far as inspiration, information, and all of that. Like I can focus on demographics, ethnocultural shifts, multiculturalism policy, national identity, indigenous relations, right? Social values and family values and norms and all of that. Media, arts. There's a lot that does wind up influencing Canadians in one way or another. And I realize that the X platform is largely fairly adversarial. Um,
Yeah, can
and
be.
it can be, it can be a little bit hard to get traction, but it's not impossible. I mean, I see other creators that that are on here and successful. So it gives me an opportunity to kind of draw on them. I don't necessarily have to be creating content entirely by myself either. So there's more flexibility overall.
So I just have to ask you. I mean, technically this is obviously, well, not technically, absolutely this is your show, but I'm accustomed to asking questions because that's kind of what I do. I'm the question guy. So why did you decide to put down liberal discourse and go with this? What was your reasoning behind that?
Well, for the reasons that I just mentioned, when you're talking about liberal discourses, in some ways it's kind of narrow. You're relying more on having conversations all like frequently, which kind of limits some of the content that I can put out. Uh, because you're more focused on what the topics are that you're looking at coming up. Whereas uh, zeitgeist, when you're talking about the spirit of the times, and really this is an effort to kind of capture where Canada is because we're not static. The culture, the politics, everything is changing day by day, month by month. Where we are now is certainly not where we were 5 years ago, and I think that's one of the reasons why Spaces gets as much action as it does. So this, like I said, the ability to broaden the scope really was what I was looking at as far as taking this up in this way.
Okay. Joe and I, we discussed it in in the back channels. We talk a lot, and you've come up a couple times in conversation, and you and I have talked in the past. I've had some nebulous conversations with you that do serve a purpose. But now that you've made this choice, I might as well just be forward with you on this. And Joe and I talked about it. A little bit of a reveal here. We always thought that you would have done better had you named your show Classic Liberal Discourse. In order, seriously, in order to create, well, for starters, you're a classic liberal. You are one of a dying breed. There's not a lot of, what do they call them, blue dog Democrats running around these days. You're much more of the cut of the classic traditional liberal, right? Modern liberalism is nothing like liberalism that you grew up and you often pontificate for and advocate for. So I think that would have been a little bit more true to you and probably would have brought a lot more people um, into your room and into your program, because I think when people see liberalism today or liberal, it's basically a slur. I, I'm not, I don't feel that personally, and I know liberals don't see it that way. But anyone who's not a liberal doesn't have a very high opinion because they equate it to progressivism, which is the ruling sort of arc of liberal discourse these days. The predominant power within the camp. Look at the Democrat Party, right? And Squad. This is the future of Democrats in the United States of America, not classic liberals like, Kennedy and others that you might name, even people like Tulsi Gabbard, who were forced to leave the party because they just couldn't see anything reflected in the current state of the party and the direction it was going within their ideals.
Well, I think I mean I agree with you to a point. The problem is because the word liberal has been so badly degraded, thanks to progressivism, it
Yes.
really is an uphill battle. And just by throwing the word classical in front of it, not too many really understand that there is a very clear delineation. Um,
Yes.
so that's where it can be problematic. But the advantage with Zeitgeist is that it is, to all intents and purposes, neutral. We're
Yes.
talking about the spirit of the times,
Mm-hmm.
and, it allows me to play around with other things because
Yeah.
I'm a data kinda girl, I like to go fishing for statistics, I like to find, interesting media influences, some old things that are kind of surprising, bring them back, which I will be doing. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at. But you know what? Enough about me. I actually
Hmm.
asked you to come on.
I was hoping you wouldn't notice that discrepancy.
Yeah, I know. Well, it is a casual conversation. I mean,
Yeah,
this is not one of those, grill 'em kind of things, but you have just finished season 6?
7.
7, 7. Sorry, I
Hmm.
was close. Of, Canada Talks Tonight. I know you're looking forward to your break, but this past
Very much
season,
so.
you had quite the contentious, title or theme.
Yeah, some people definitely saw it that way for sure. Well,
Yeah,
did you want me to just give you a little bit of a breakdown about the whys and what fors for that, or?
absolutely.
All right. Okay. Well, just for your reference and for those who care to listen to this later, and of course, Ted, who's there. Holy smokes! Thank you, Ted. That means a lot. By season 7, it'd become clear that the pure civic nationalism and the belief that shared values and institutions alone uh, could not continue to hold the country together indefinitely. And it was no longer sufficient. And, decades of aggressive multiculturalism, sustained high migration, critically low, native fertility rates in our own country shifted the demographic and the cultural balance in the country, as you well know, at unprecedented speed. I mean, social trust is eroding, parallel societies are forming all around us, balkanization is happening in real time, founding European Canadian people becoming a minority in the land where their own ancestors built. So we kind of reached a point where just continuing to speak only in the abstract civic terms while ignoring the realities of blood and ancestry and homeland that were starting to become entrenched in the day-to-day conversation in organizations within the populist movement was no longer honest or responsible. You know, Dark wasn't an attack or meant to be an attack on civic values in any way, shape, or form. It was simply a recognition that those values do require a stable and rooted people to survive. At least that is, our perception. So what we sought to accomplish was, number one, we wanted to force an honest confrontation with the demographic reality of where we're at. A lot of people offer platitudes, speak in vagaries towards this, and it's all a lot of cope talk. But there's long term consequences that are coming with the way that we have run this country in the last long term. We wanted to reclaim the language and the concepts of national continuity, right? Emphasize the importance still today of ancestry and homeland that had been deliberately poisoned and made taboo by such words as the ones that you and maybe some others might have taken exception to post World War II. We wanted to demonstrate that people have a legitimate right and, in fact, a duty to remain the demographic and cultural core of their own country. I would advocate that not just for Canada, I would advocate it for Zimbabwe or anywhere else you could name, no less. We wanted to show that ethno nationalist concerns are not an opposite to civic nationalism, that they sort of serve the same principle, but add an additional layer that is still, I think, and Joe believes to be pertinent in the Canadian conversation and to the fabric of the nation, uh, but a necessary corrective when the founding core is being eroded means that this conversation needs to happen and we need to take it a little bit more seriously and actually give it voice and some oxygen. Lastly, I'd say uh, move the community beyond just simple sloganeering into a serious discussion about what it actually means, the consequences, the cost of preserving Canada. So uh, it can remain recognizable to the people who founded the nation, and well, they're not here now, obviously, but their offspring are. Um, and I don't know how you feel, but I know that as a heritage Canadian, um, who doesn't speak from a place of race, but from investment and connection to the land that you know we build. It matters. I was walking my dog last week down a path in British Columbia, a nice paved path, and I share it with everyone and anyone who walks by me. This path was very old, but it's paved and it's functional, and I'm left with the thoughts: my grandfather paid for this path, not my dad, not me, my granddad. He was here before either me or my father. And if you can take that and walk that back further in history, um, what does that actually mean when you're talking about a family and its investment within a nation? We can't all just be equal the day somebody shows up and gets a piece of paper and um, decides that they're going to just follow the law and they are on par with everyone who was born and raised here and whose families have contributed to building the infrastructure, the society, um, the culture, the lifestyle, the social contract, bled for it, wrote it, created it, to the people who came here for the very reason of enjoying those benefits with no sacrifice toward toward it themselves. I think it's fair to recognize that there is a difference. I don't think it's inhumane. I don't think it creates classes of people. I think it's an honest recognition of contribution. No different than when you work in a job, but in different hours, have different educational requirements in order to fulfill that job. It's the way life works. So that was sort of the purpose. We knew that the Blood and Soil Arc would create discomfort, obviously, and pushback and misunderstanding. We got a lot of DMs, both inside and outside the community. We knew some would call it divisive and extreme, but we pushed on anyway because avoidance of these topics going forward is never an option for Joe and I. We're committed to holding the most critical conversations that this country can talk about, third rail topics most people are afraid to talk about, and show that you can discuss these things, whether you believe in them or not, whether you support them or not. This is the important distinction, in a responsible fashion, and set an example and a precedent for how to have a healthy dialogue around these conversations and train Canadians to remember how to have uncomfortable conversations in a civil way and disagree. That's hard to do on Twitter because there's a lot of assholes on this platform who just want to either A, be in an echo chamber, or B, the second they hear something they don't like, they run away. So the stakes in these conversations are civilizational. Pretending the transformation isn't happening or that these civic principles that we cling on to today alone will magically preserve the nation once the founding people become a minority is not prudence in my mind. It's surrender. So we believe that these discomforting conversations uh, in the short term are preferable um, to help Canadians forward as these people who are trying to help the nation, maybe not the same way that they would want or they feel is proper or they have been taught is wrong, are actually still on their side um, in the most fundamental way, in that they are a nationalist who loves their country and wants what's best for the country.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you, giving me the lengthy skinny on that. Um, I know you've mentioned it a couple of times in CTT spaces, but I appreciate you kind of going over that here. Blood and soil. Now, this is one of those. I can appreciate why it's contentious for Canadians. Certainly, it is for me personally, and that's because I have family that was in World War One and Two. So on principle, blood and soil, I cannot get behind. I appreciate the desire to have these third rail conversations. They are uncomfortable, no question. But by the same token, that's certain things I just simply can't get behind. Now I do know that the idea itself is actually a whole lot older than simply Nazi Germany
Yes,
and World War II. I mean, it actually goes back to ancient Greece. Plato had something similar,
correct.
not identical, but he did call it the noble lie. It is a nationalism is a bit of a construct to have
Mm,
social cohesion, right? And they use that actually in the 18th century, thanks to industrial revolution, where you have a lot of people flocking in from the countryside into cities, and now you've got a bunch of people who are disparate and they have no connections to each other. So trying to instill a sense of community, they draw on the farmland and the folk tales and all of that to create a sense of unity. Canada, of course, is very fractured right now, and not just not just through external pressures that are coming in, like immigration into Canada, but our media as well. I mean, it's very easy to have a cohesive idea and vision of the country when you have a limited channels and media outlets. Now, of course, it's so fractured the landscape. I mean, it's kind of open season, as it were. But I can appreciate where you're coming from. I just looking at the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, they released new numbers today. Apparently, 247,980 are here in Canada.
How
That's
many?
an 3,247,980.
Yeah, yeah,
That's an extraordinary number.
yeah. It's what is it, about 7% or something like that?
Well, it certainly outpaces everybody else. I was looking at some of these numbers earlier today. Let me see if I can bring this up. Statistics Canada. Where are you here? There we go. Nope. There we go. Um, by I think the next one down for countries that, yeah, here we go. China, I mean, India, I mean, 3 times as many. China's 1,253,985, and this is according to 2025 numbers. Of course, the census just came out, so we could be looking at something a little bit different. But after that comes Ukraine, then Philippines, Mexico, Nigeria, and so on. So this is something else, really, to be looking at. Um, these kind of this kind of influx.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, first, if I can, I'd like to speak a little bit here to the comments and your concerns about blood and soil, because I think you said a lot of things right there. Um, but I also feel the need to defend the language um, unapologetically, and I'll tell you why. Okay, first off, the words blood and soil are not inherently evil. Okay, they are descriptive of blood, which refers to shared ancestry, kinship, and genetic and cultural inheritance. And soil, of course, refers to the specific land, geography, and environment that shapes a people over generations. The phrase blood and soil, which in German is Blut und Boden, has roots that predate, of course, the Nazi regime by decades. Like you said, it emerged in, I think, the 19th century. I know, the Germans romanticized it with their Volkish movement. It emphasized, of course, a deep connection between the people, the Volk, their ancestral bloodline and kinship, and the land, Boden. that shaped their culture, their character, and their way of life. The concept from older European traditions, the idea that a people are organically tied to their homeland through ancestry, through custom and language, and shared struggle, exists throughout Europe. I mean, we look at serfdom, um, very much blood and soil built into the culture of Europe anywhere you go. Uh, you know, it was very popular with agricultural and nationalist circles in the 20th century as a reaction against rapid industrialization, urbanization, and cosmopolitanism, which is why liberals, I think, have such a problem with it, because they're very urbanist, very progressive, and a lot of traditional conservative viewed people, farmers, people who still really held value in tracts of land, um, saw that as as an important thing to remember. And while the Nazis heavily promoted uh, blood and soil as state ideology, you know, especially in the rural and farming policies, they did not invent these underlying ideas. And similar concepts exist not just in Europe, but in Japan, in Israel, and almost any even in Canada with our indigenous population, it exists. Um, you know, the after World War II, the victorious powers and subsequent cultural institutions deliberately linked, I feel, blood and soil almost exclusively to Nazi ideology, purposefully. It became a rhetorical weapon used to paint any form of ethnic or national self preservation as inherently fascist or genocidal. The term was itself weaponized to create strong guilt association within Western populations, making it socially, intellectually costly to argue that a founding people have a legitimate interest in remaining the demographic and cultural majority in their own homeland. You know, and I can't support the globalists' MO of capturing words that are perfectly good words that promote healthy, natural, age-old sentiments and making them verboten for the purposes of avoiding conversation, removing them from conversation. You know the quote as well as I do about controlling language and what that does in regards to controlling the conversation, controlling the narrative, and ultimately controlling what people believe. It's very 1984.
No, I know exactly where you're coming from. I'm probably, a bit more flexible than others might be. I do, however, recognize that there are some parallels that Germany had, that we are suffering from as well. Let's not forget, they only unified into a nation under Otto von Bismarck in 1871. And they did struggle to forge a cohesive national and identity. And this is one of those things that we're struggling with right now here in Canada, which is after Donald Trump was elected, mentioned 51st state, we lose our minds entirely. And
Yes.
but it's put us into a bit of an existential crisis. We've got a chunk of the country that's elbows up and ban American products. We've got the western half of the country that's looking at this going, oh, you guys are nuts. We trade 75% of our economy with the United States, and you want us to just kind of, rip that all up and say, we're done. I mean, are you crazy? And now, of course, Alberta separation. And that's not including some of the other things that are going on as well. Of course, you have your Quebec separatists, you have the Indigenous and their pursuits. So right now, Canada is suffering from its own identity crisis, and one of the things that I can sort of see as a parallel, and this is why I am disinclined to, uh, be a a cheerleader for some of the more um, mythic aspects that go with this blood and soil, um, phrase, is that it we are in danger in a way of having charismatic people come in and take us in a direction that we don't necessarily want to go in. All it's gonna take is one really good charismatic guy with
Hmm.
something that most people can get on board with, and then
Hmm.
what? And that's a I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm recognizing the danger that we're kind of in right now because we are so fractured, and there is a significant chunk of the population that does actually want to achieve unity. I mean, even in Alberta, the separatist movement that's happening out here, it's difficult to gauge where the traction is. We know that 400,000 people signed the petition to stay. 300 and change thousand said that we're signing to get out. How that'll actually shake out, anybody's best guess. But it does show that, for all of the momentum that Alberta separatism does have, just like Quebec separatism did back in the 80s and 90s, it's difficult
Hmm.
to say that, overall people would still, if it was if we could really have something tangible, that we could say that we could make Canada work, people might very well be inclined to stay. So that's kind of what kind of the lay of the land the way I sort of see it. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, this is where I think you and I differ in our approach to this problem. I think you and I probably by and large had the same starting point, but our conclusions, um, I think, diverge at this point because, well, let me first just be clear. I am at heart in this day a national populist. That is how I would describe myself. I believe in ordered liberty, real freedom for the individual, but within a strong, cohesive nation that has the will and the authority to protect its own existence. When liberal democracies and their institutions become captured and no longer serve the people or preserve the nation, I believe a strong, accountable executive authority actually becomes necessary, not as a permanent state, but as a corrective. I mean, of course, I would only support that kind of authority if it actually uplifts and protects the individual within the collective rather than crushing him. That's a very, very important um, caveat for me. But
Yeah,
I,
can you I
yeah,
actually I've been dying to ask you this.
I'm sure you have.
I have, because you keep, mentioning in various CTT spaces about liberal democracy, being a failure, and I really would like you to fill me in on what is the alternative, and I mean in concrete terms. What exactly are we talking about here?
All right. Hmm. How to take this? Okay. Well, first off, let's meet you where you're at. All right. I would say, like you, as I said, we have very similar starting points. Okay. I think back in the day, I would have easily classified myself as a classic liberal with maybe some conservative leadings. That's because I'm an Albertan. Um, a large portion of my family is old stock from Montreal. That is where the deep-rooted liberalism enters my blood and the philosophy. So it's very interesting because my family is in one part conservative and one part very liberal, and they very much make Christmas and Thanksgiving very interesting. Um, I myself, like I said, I believe in individual liberty. Ultimately, limited government, free markets, and the idea that people of goodwill can make a civic nation work through shared values alone. All right. That is an ideal that I would like to see because if you look at classic Greek democracy, that really set the tone for what democracy is. Uh, it is a government by the people, where the people have a vested interest in being informed, and they have a duty to uphold that democracy and and contribute and participate in it. Now, when we look at this through the liberal lens, we idealize the notion that all free people who can do what they want to do when they want to do it will somehow just continue in perpetuity to hold their responsibility to this democracy. It gives me so much freedom. I can do whatever I want. So, of course, I have a vested interest in protecting it without any knowledge of what that actually means over time. So I watched liberal democracy get captured by globalist institutions in real time, corrupt elites, and bureaucratic inertia. When the system no longer protects the nation or its people, limited government, I think, ultimately becomes a surrender. You know, Mass immigration, low fertility rates, multiculturalism at scale has destroyed our social trust and our cohesion. Um, and the founding core is being erased in real time. So classic liberalism assumes people will naturally self-correct for the common good. In practice, tribalism, low trust, and elite betrayal end up winning. Because when the marketplace of ideas is rigged and the people are replaced with different ideologies that don't fall in line with liberal democracy, uh, these thoughts become suicide because that self-correction never comes. So, though I still value true liberty and individual rights, um, they can only exist inside a strong, cohesive nation that prioritizes its own survival.
Sure.
That is a must-have. So when democracy becomes a lie that sells out its people, I think it's time to support a strong, accountable national authority. Sort of a conditional Caesarian is something that I would flirt with for the purpose of putting the nation first, not to crush the individual, but to preserve the conditions under which they can actually be free. So, in short, I don't feel like I've abandoned liberalism or uh, liberal democracy. I think liberalism abandoned the nation because when the house is on fire, it's not a time to debate property rights and stupid shit. You grab the hose and you put out the fire, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Right. So let me see, because you've danced around it quite a fair bit there. You, you're talking about a monarchy with aristocracy.
No, God, no,
Because when you talked
no.
about, well, then when I say concrete terms, I mean if you're going to like how much limiting of democracy is going to happen in this exchange. Like, what are you visualizing here?
Ask the question again.
When you're talking about having a more controlling form of government to bring things back into order, and you mentioned czardom, what exactly kind of structure are we looking at? Because I'm going to assume that democracy, as we know it conventionally, isn't going to be part of that for a period of time. Have I got that right?
Well, I really haven't come that far. I'm sort of right. I know that you read a lot. I know that you're very informed on some of the most pertinent voices of the 20th century, um, maybe even earlier than that. Um, I too find value in that, but I am a bit of an observer. I have a good political intuition. And when I began to invest myself in this and seeing the way things move, I can project where they are going. For example, in early 2015, I knew Trump was going to win. A lot of people thought that was stupid talk. I knew it was going to happen because I began to understand what was missing in the conversation and what people were looking. And he was a strong man, came along during weak times, started saying the things that a lot of people were told since childhood that weren't proper to say. And wouldn't you know it, look at us, we're still here today, all of our arms and legs attached, moving along just fine, thank you. And how many times was this guy supposed to be the end of the world? Yet we are a strong man during weak times. So that's why I became a populist, a national populist, because it's, from my perspective, if this democracy is to be saved, the only hope is to wake up people as brutally as possible, shake them awake, violently if necessary. I'm not talking about actual physical violence, but I'm saying don't spare any language. We have no time to waste, to wake people up and to tell them to vote for their principles alone. Do not take devil's deals. Don't compromise. Ask for real people to come up and fight for the things that you hold dearly. So if I hold national populism dearly, naturally, I want a leader who is going to stand tall and reflect the virtue and the importance of heritage Canadians and the responsibility of responsible migration and civic nationalism with those who assimilate. I've never been against migration. I'm still not. But when the ship takes on too much water, there's no more, you can't take on more people. If you do, you capsize, you lose the whole ship. It's time for us to bail water. It's time for us to right the ship before we continue on with life as we would both want it to be. So right now, I advocate for a strong man to come up through our democracy, and I urge Canadian citizens to push audaciously for decisions that are difficult, that are going to require sacrifice, that aren't necessarily pleasant, under the realization that we created a reality in this country that over 30, 40, 50 years is so terrible that within a short period of time, it's going to ask a lot of everyone to correct. And we can do it with the laws and the powers that are currently on the books. You've heard me say it many times on CTT. I would like Alberta to secede so that Ottawa needs to come to renegotiate to Alberta, no longer able to pay its equalization payments to Quebec and keep them on board with their policy in order to renegotiate a new confederation and perhaps a constitutional republic and reinvigorate this democracy. Now, short of an honest democracy, I will take a benevolent tyrant in the long end of it all if I absolutely have to. Because at the end of the day, the one thing, and that might sound audacious to certainly a liberal like yourself, or somebody who's been a part and raised in a liberal democracy for a very long period of time, but it really isn't. If you look at the East, if you look throughout Europe, where half of these people still have kings and queens and princes and the like, living under some sort of authoritarian regime is not only been beneficial to society, but it has been the classic mode of operation throughout civilization since time immemorial. It is democracy, and I don't use this term to be divisive or to deride it, but derisive. But it is the aberration. It is the outlier, not totalitarianism, not authoritarianism. Because I honestly believe at the end of the day, people need to be led. People do not deserve the freedoms that we have today, not because they're serfs or they're peasants or class for any class purpose, but because they're irresponsible with it. And when they're irresponsible with it, it hurts everyone else. The minority that maintain their discipline, maintain their their duty, and then it wastes. And there's no democracy in this world that has ever succeeded long term. It wastes and exhausts itself ultimately with corruption and capture. Politicians that are supposed to serve the people end up becoming doormen for the powers that grease their palms in order to do what they want with what is supposed to be ours. See, they don't need our money. They get it through taxes. They get the golden parachutes from the people that finance their campaigns and give them their golden parachutes for when they're out. That's why someone like AOC, becomes, she comes into the game as a a student living in an apartment, eating mac and cheese, talking about her student loans. Balls, I bet you anything. This woman is on Martha's Vineyard next door to Barack Obama by the time she retires, and she does it all on a government salary. What a bunch of shit. And then people malign a guy like Donald Trump, who comes into democracy because he's got no political background. This is the standard thinking of the liberal majority these days. This man knows nothing about politics. He's a businessman. Well, look in history, Vanessa, you know as much as I do. That is the absolute paragon of democratic rulership. Strong community leaders and businessmen and successful people who take time out of their own lives to roll up their sleeves and commit themselves for low or no money to community in order to help give back to what was given to them. That is the purpose. He is the model of what a successful and proper politician is and should be in the modern age. Somebody who didn't get into it for money, who did it to make change, positive change, and had the tools in life and in business to contribute to the greater good. So I said a lot there. I'll let you pick it up.
Well, I appreciate that. Donald Trump is a particularly interesting character, and it really is indicative of how politics, when you have a leader and it revolves around their personal psychology. Because you can have an extremely strong leader in Donald Trump who is very much pro-America. And, because he has a lot of experience working in the corporate world where you have cooperation, negotiation, and all of that, he brings a specific set of skills to the role. You look at other historical figures who have also had a very strong personal psychology. You look at Mao or, Mussolini and his cohort in Germany, then it becomes distorted, right? And the cult of personality fails, but they're charismatic, and you don't know until you're off the edge of a cliff. But there's more to it than that. I mean, that's one aspect, but when I look at issues of democracy, it really comes down to systems. All of these systems have a hierarchy that's built into it. It doesn't matter if it's a personalist dictatorship, like some of those leaders I mentioned, Mao, Mussolini. You can have one party or military regimes. You can have hereditary monarchies or theocracies or high capacity modern autocracies. They all work in a similar manner. They're going to they're going to skew because humans are involved and they have incentives and like to curry favor. In our democracy here in Canada, we have Mark Carney. Before, of course, we had Justin Trudeau. He had his coterie of his cabinet who was never going to challenge him on anything, right? He was very insulated from the feedback that he received. It's the same thing with Mark Carney, who's ostensibly a finance guy, sort of Donald Trump light, came in from the business world and is now heading Canada because, whatever the Americans do, we have to do it too. Unless, of course, it requires us to put our elbows up. But it is when I
Just as
overall,
a point of order, I find it interesting that you would compare Carney to Trump. I don't see any likeness whatsoever, other than the fact that they both like money. That's where the similarity begins and ends, as far as I'm concerned.
No, you're right. And look, personality-wise, absolutely, they are not the same at all. Both of them do not. Neither of them served as either an MP or an elected official in the States, right? They literally came in from the business world. Boom, right into the top positions too. And I object to us having to copy the United States like that. Just like I objected having a family dynasty where you have Bush Senior and George Bush
Oh
W,
yes.
and now we've got
Yeah.
a Pierre Trudeau and Justin. So, I mean, can we don't have to take every
Aristocracy by any other name, right?
yeah, we don't have to take we don't have to do everything the United States does. We don't, right? But ultimately, when you have humans involved, it there's going to be an amount of sycophancy that goes on, a willingness to protect the leader from unfortunate feedback. Why? Because you want to curry favor, right? You want to, climb that pole, that greasy pole of power, right? And the closer you can be, and the more favor you can garner, the less chance you're going to be knocked out. But then mind you, everybody's out with their knives to kind of, move their way up as well. It is a failure of human systems overall. The problem with democracy, generally speaking, is that you have a lot of instead of this power concentrating itself by means of force, they do it through coercion of great commercials, great promises, and the people buy in and they elect. And I'm not saying there's some funny stuff going on in the background when it comes to voting, but you never know, right? So there is no perfect system. The only advantage that democracy has is, as much as sometimes the results are maybe not what you want, is that it people do have the option of participating and genuinely do feel like they're participating, even if they decide, I'm not voting this year. I know that the numbers have certainly steadily risen of late in the past few years with people just saying, that's it. It doesn't seem to matter what we do. So that's kind of, the way that I see it. You probably don't agree, or I don't know. I mean, do you think there might be something to it?
Well, again, we talk about feelings. We talk about people feeling like they're participating. I have absolutely no interest in how people feel regarding their participation. You see, I still prefer accountable democratic mechanism when they actually work. That is my default. But like I said, when institutions are captured by interests hostile to the nation, and when the political class treats the country as a business to be looted, then a strong, honest national leader who puts the people first becomes preferable to me over that of a fake democracy that only ends up serving itself, which is where I think we are right now. I mean, I believe ultimately that a nation exists to protect and uplift its people. All right. When the individual is elevated above the survival of the group that makes that liberty possible, you will axiomatically lose both. So I want a system that protects the individual within a strong national framework, ideally, not one that sacrifices the nation, on the altar of feelings and radical individualism, which I feel a lot of liberals um, and libertarians end up injecting into the political system. You see, we talk about freedom. First off, when you talk about authoritarians, you default to three names. Mao, Hitler, and the worst of the worst. But there's also been many, many, many hundreds of maybe thousands that you can't name that did a pretty good job. This is something I ask people today. They talk about my freedom. I want to protect my freedom. What is your freedom? What is your liberty? What is it that you think makes you free? We tried to cover this in CTT, but I think it got lost on some people. I don't think they were able to really zone in on what we were getting at. Like, you can have almost all the freedoms you can name under a dictatorship or some sort of authoritarian government that you can have in a liberal democracy in a lot of ways. You might go, well, how does that make sense? Well, you don't have, you could be gay. You could have gay lover. You could dye your hair pink. You could wear your anthrax t-shirt. You could go camping whenever you damn well felt like it. You could have a kid or not. You could have a family or not. You could work. You could go to school. You can travel at home or abroad. You can vacation. Most of the freedoms that these people talk about are the kinds of freedoms they ultimately end up taking for advantage and look right past the ones that they would be getting anyways, regardless of the system. Ultimately, I think a lot of people think, I want the right to protest government. Okay, so if you're in a liberal government and you protest, and just like Ramandan did he get satisfaction? How did that work out for him? How did that work out for Shareware Canada? They got absolutely nowhere. In fact, the political class ends up stacking up on these people and ends up spending your money and mine in order to pin people like that down to the mat and make an example of them for people who choose to rise up against the system. That sounds an awful lot like authoritarianism to me. So I ask again, what is it that ultimately you're looking to do? Well, I want to push back hard against the government. And ultimately, if I need to, I want to be able to overthrow them. Well, how's that any different than an authoritarian government? You're going to end up doing the same. Either you have a benevolent authoritarian who's at least honest and says, you know what? You're my country. Because you're my country, you're my house. I have no interest in letting anyone wear their shoes into my house. I have no interest in letting people throw housebreakers in my house, house wrecking parties in my house. I have all the interest in the world of protecting my house, keeping my lawn curated, and being the best neighbor I can with the other houses around me. So, to that end, if you're not able, so that person is going to be interested in preserving the well-being of his people, their prosperity, their ability to procreate, to contribute to the nation, because a strong nation is a happy nation and a prosperous nation that makes a leader succeed and ultimately, I guess, even through the case of vanity, look good. But a democracy, this democracy that we keep fighting for right now, it is hopelessly compromised. It's not real. Votes and elections are being stolen. We all know it. When people push back, they get crushed. So if your accounting of freedom is the kind of music you listen to and the kind of clothes you like to wear and what your lover to be, you'll find that in almost 98% of the other totalitarian states you might name. Obviously not the ones that are run by theocracies, because they have very strong brutal opinions on that. That's certainly not something I'd advocate for. And I'm not even advocating for totalitarianism. I'm just saying, when we're talking about preserving freedom and liberty, let's have an honest conversation. Realize what you've already lost. Realize what you do have, and that you can have that in another type of government. And just be honest of what you're really fighting for and preserving what ultimately is a rigged and gamed system that is under the control of a select group of people, of the elite, the corporatocracy, that is gamed from beginning to end to keep you in control. They know the rules. All they want to do is make sure they're not even concerned with you getting your $200 and pass and go anymore. They'll just bring new players into the game. Cogs in the machine. Cogs to feed the GDP. I'm not interested. A nation serves its people, not its GDP. Right? We've lost this understanding, I feel. We've lost this institutional imperative. Like I said, though, I have no interest in totalitarianism crushing individual rights for their own sake. What I'm describing ultimately, and where I think we're closer to, is an emergency authority when the normal system is broken down, like how even liberal democracies grant extraordinary powers during war and external crises, as I've talked about using the Emergency Act to handle some of our problems. The powers that currently exist in the Canadian government within the right hands could do a lot of good for this country and fix a lot of problems in short order. Ultimately, I think every nation deserves a place to exist. The people deserve the right to be the focus of that nation. Canada is no different. And when people come here, I would welcome them so long as they honestly want to be here for the right reasons, because they love our country. They love what we stand for. They admire the people who are here, want to join them, want to contribute to what we are building, willing to put in their time, not ask for more than they deserve getting off the boat. And ultimately, because them being here serves a purpose that we decided we needed to be filled for no other reason. None of this is happening. We are not free. Our elections are not free. Our, our, our immigration policies were never put to referendum. We never asked for any of this shit. So I ask yourself, beyond the names and the tropes, what are liberals fighting for? Because I don't see it existing in today's world. We lost it a long time ago. And the best thing we can all do is at least be honest about it and go from that point forward.
The issue that I have when I look at what you're proposing, well, a couple things. The biggest one being that there is no way to tell the people, by the way, you're now going to have a temporary tyrant and have them be on board with that, especially if the process of democracy is suspended. I mean, back in 1950,
Agree?
yeah, 1957, it was Louis Saint Laurent. His government made a cack-handed comment about how they had a year left in their more than a year left in their mandate, did not have to call an election. And when they did call an election, Diefenbaker managed to sweep the board and put them into the penalty box. Canadians
Cute.
have this is the issue when you talk about things like this. The people will have a visceral reaction to it,
I'm sure they
right?
will. Nobody wants to give up freedom,
No, absolutely not. Well, and the ability to choose. I
perceived
mean,
or otherwise.
perceived or otherwise. I mean, listen, you can choose to vote, you can choose not to vote. The option is yours and there. You tell them that they can't, and you you might be looking at something else entirely. So I'm just going to, for what it's worth, I need to bracket what you said with that because it can be easy to get caught up in the romanticism of the idea of a patriot king. The likelihood of actually getting one, I think extraordinary odds.
Yeah.
The United States, partially because of its own mythos and construction, does still allow for a Donald Trump type to occur because what is America founded on? You know, um, Liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? These things. Canada is very different. It's peace, order, and good governance. That is a
We have
decidedly
none of
different.
that.
That is well, I mean, we're struggling with it in some of our urban areas. I'm not going to lie, but it is also a very indicative of a very, very different mindset. However, having said that, there is still sufficient bleed over from the United States that the idea of having a democracy is important, and you're going to be hard pressed to find anybody that'd be willing to give it up, even if.
Yeah. Well, please understand one thing for sure. For starters, okay, I see you leading the conversation to that point. We're jumping clear across the shark here to the point where I'm saying that is not the starting point for me. That is the point where things have gone terribly wrong, and somebody strong who is going to, I don't know, do what's necessary in order to gain the support necessary to fight for this country and take it back in a way that's meaningful, I think you'd be surprised with how many people would fight for that. And I'm not just talking about at the ballot box. I'm talking about literally fight if they had to, if it came to that. Obviously, no one is going to choose this. There's no way to elect that. We have to work with the system we have. Like I said, Alberta leaving and forcing a renegotiation of Confederacy is the best, most powerful, most potent, most realistic way to achieve the objective of rekindling a true democracy that serves this country from coast to coast to coast and reinvigorates it with all new laws, all new social contract for the modern age, taking the internet and AI and everything into consideration. Like we are, all governments in the West are running on fucking patchware from from the from the 30s and 60s. None of it covers the needs of today. For God's sakes, the Americans are still arguing about whether or not they meant muskets when they're talking about the right to bear arms, or squad automatic weapons, or worse. So I would say we have to be careful when we talk about giving up our freedom and stuff, and just couching any talk about this as something a bridge too far, a non-starter. Think of Aldous Huxley. Think about what he said in 1931. Quote, the perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitudes. This is where we are right now. There is absolutely not one part of what he said there that isn't happening in this day and age right now. This is very Nostradamus. This is very poignant, and it's the reality of the modern age. So again, I always want to tell liberals, you know, and I'm definitely not talking about the elbows up people. Those people are so fucking far gone. There's other conversations those people need to have. I'm talking more over people like you, people who are reasonable, people who have realistic expectations, who understand the value of civic duty, and have a genuine understanding, appreciation of liberty. That you also have to be honest with the shortcomings of liberty. And we have to understand whether you're a liberal, whether you're a conservative, whether you're a populist, whether you're authoritarian, whether you're a monarchist, whatever it is that you espouse, that every government system that has ever been derived is flawed, imperfect, and we have not found the perfect system right now. Anyone who tells you any one of these systems is perfect is lying to you. There are great advantages to many of them. I can look at China. Now, this is going to sound Trudeau-esque, okay, but I don't mean it from the perspective of admiring them for their totalitarianism, because liberals would see any comment just in that light. But China is kicking the ass off the West. Why? Not because they're communist, because communist is flawed and failed. They are what they will not name because they know that it is the one government system that absolutely can challenge and defeat them in the field of battle. And that is the evolution of fascism to the form of state capitalism. And when you look at state capitalism, you look at a government that never allows corporations to become more powerful than itself and maintains a healthy economy within its own nation, protects its people. American multinationals and multinationals of any other nation you might name have no authority, have no manipulative ability to flex in China. I admire that. I wish my government would protect me from multinational corporations wanting to rape and pillage my country and steal my milk and honey and your milk and honey. I wish we could find a way to do that through democracy. And I've said it many times on CTT. There is a way through democracy. It's the same thing we did with church. There needs to be a clear delineation and a separation of corporation and state, every bit as emphatic and enforced as the separation between church and state that we once tackled and conquered. And look at it today. Notice that when church and state weren't separated, the church was the bee's knees. Everyone wanted to be, I mean, they had all the power and authority. The second there was the separation, they had no value to the political class whatsoever. And now they waste away. Now we burn them down and we throw rocks at them and we make fun of them and we turn our back on our faith. It serves no practical purpose to the elite and the political class. Corporations are the new churches, and they're running the show from behind the curtain. They control the politicians, not you and me.
I might go one bit further and say that banking, whoever controls the money, is who's actually running the show, not necessarily corporations. Correct. The banking is a level above. But neither here nor there. I do want to. You've mentioned a couple of things. You've covered a lot of terrain.
Thank you. I hope that's a good thing.
Well, it is, but it means I got to drag you back about 5 or 6 minutes here to go on. And
sorry, when I get on a roll, I'm hard to slow down.
No, that's fine, and I hate to.
I realize that.
Yeah, no, it's fine, and I hate to interrupt, but I know that you mentioned Alberta and how exiting would be an opportunity for renewal. Let's put it that way. What do you see happening if that happens?
Well, I think it's a long, drawn out process. I think, first off, Canada will and is continue to do everything absolutely possible to block Alberta from ever leaving. They would be foolish not to. Why? Because they have the ultimate control. The game is rigged. Ontario is very much in charge of the nation. Quebec, through its pandering, through Ontario's pandering to Quebec, is the merchant army that keeps them afloat and in power. As long as Quebec keeps getting its way and what it wants, they'll continue to support the Liberals. By and large, it's why we say within the anthem, Quebec taught the masterclass. This is a province that understands how to leverage its value in the Canadian sphere. Alberta has all the same type of leverage. They have it in people. They have it in population. Alberta has it in wealth. Alberta needs to understand the power of that wealth and how to leverage it properly. Maybe it already does. Maybe the problem is there's too many Danielle Smiths who talk a good game but aren't really pulling for the home team. They're just trying to offer the platitudes and kick that can a little further down the road and maybe ask for some minor appeasements from Ottawa and see whether or not, they can keep this going the way it does. Everyone knows Alberta and the West doesn't have equal representation. Everyone knows the founding of this country. They broke up the West in order to dilute its power. Everyone knows that there are provinces in the East that have disproportional representation in the House of Commons because they were damn good negotiators. Good on them. Well, Alberta is playing from behind. So if Alberta can pull the plug on that wealth to those equalization payments, Ottawa no longer has the ability to to pay the native bands, to pay Quebec any of their unofficial militants. Let's call them that, for lack of a better word in my mind right now, to go to bat and derail this process. Maybe Alberta needs to learn how to be a little bit more belligerent and not play and make things more complicated for the way that it offers its financial aid and honors its obligations, and drag things out as far as it can. Create real financial restraints in Ottawa and start taking care of its issues at home and let this get just really filthy ugly to the point where Ottawa needs to negotiate and come correct. So ultimately, I think if Alberta, by hook or by crook, was able to stay the course and walk to independence, personally, between you and me, as much as I love the notion, as much as I support it for a rebirth of not only province, which is my home province, I love Alberta dearly, my nation, I don't see it happening. I don't I don't think we have critical mass. Maybe we will one day. I don't think anytime soon. 60% of conservatives who vote CPC are in support of separatism. That's only 60%. And that's conservatives. Throw into the mix against all the conservatives that don't, all the liberals, all the NDP supporters, and all the special interest groups like the natives. You don't stand a fucking chance. You're going to get 30% if you're lucky. That's my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I look forward to the day that gets proven wrong, but I don't think I am. Anyways, I digress. The point is, if Alberta can actually have the vote, they don't even have to pull out. They just need to know that they have the sword at the throat, proverbial, of course, of Ottawa and say, let's talk. Because if Alberta was interested in remaining a part of this confederacy, that's the time to negotiate a new deal for Saskatchewan, for all the other provinces that would throw in with them for the purposes of better representation, and we create real representation. Stop giving the money to Ottawa to give to your enemies, Alberta. Stop giving the money to Ottawa to give to the native bands that have been a part of your province since before it ever became anything. Ottawa means nothing to those people. What means to those leaders of those tribes is the money that Ottawa gives them to derail you from breaking away. You got to see the threat, you got to see the reality, and you got to realize your strength and your ability and how you can best combat it. So, yeah, short of a populist awakening, Vanessa, of people en masse choosing not to support the uniparty and what I call plantation politics, there's the only chance is Alberta separation in order to renegotiate a proper new confederation. And short of that, well, the thing we all dread, but sometimes comes, the renewing, as it is known in democracies. And I pray you and I aren't here to ever see it. And I pray that day never comes. I don't want any of this. When I talk about remigration, when I talk about a moratorium on immigration, as I've said, I have a profound love for the racial diversity of this world. Most of the women I have included in my life since I was a young man are of themselves from other places. They're not from here. If you were to ask me my reason, that might be interesting. But I would say for ethnic people who want to come here, I wish we handled things right. So we wouldn't have to go down the roads that are left to us. The only way for us to salvage our nation and to ultimately honor the sacrifice and what was given to us by people that we had no right to squander on our watch. That's the key thing that I think Canadians need to remember. Yes, we're in charge. Yes, we're allowed to make our choices, but we were entrusted with the duty we were given for the purposes of passing it on to the future, not squandering it for ourselves. We're like the ingrate child who takes the dynastical inheritance, blows it all on cocaine, hookers, and fucking and Las Vegas, and has nothing to offer the children down the line. How mortified for the family that passed that forward and wanted to see their dynasty continue into the future. How irresponsible. I see that is where we're at right now. I hope I answered your question.
Well, you sort of did in spades, but I have to go back to the issue of Alberta separation again. I suppose, just so I can get this thought out here, if Canadians were, because it's so easy to get caught up in party politics, if they really stood back and had a look, what is the spheres of influence in Canada really? Okay. So, number one, you have the Indigenous. And this is because of the Royal Proclamation of 1763, right? So
The
it
Indian
established,
Act.
yeah, no, not the Indian Act, the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which recognized Indian land rights. Okay.
Right.
That's treaty making. So you've got
Mhm.
that. And you've got the Quebec Act of 1774, which explicitly preserved French civil law, language
Yeah.
rights, Catholic religious institutions, etc. Now, those are two spheres of influence. If you think of it like a seesaw, where the crown is in the middle, or now it's Ottawa, since we've taken patriated our constitution.
But have we? Well,
Ottawa.
that's a talk for another time. Go on.
Yeah, the crown or Ottawa is the center point, and whatever it wants to accomplish, it's got to balance these two interests of the Indigenous and Quebec, and this is dates back to our very earliest days, long before, right after the end of the 7 Years' War, but before Confederation. These things are still written into our Constitution now. So the advantage of Alberta having a separation vote is that it would bring these things to the forefront where we actually should be looking at them properly, because I think people underestimate how much legalism our country actually runs on legalism. There's Quebec does exceptionally well, and so do our Indigenous, because they have the best lawyers and multiples of them to really comb through and find out where they can find advantages and slowly over time press them. This is something that we don't have, because Confederation was set up after these proclamations. So from that standpoint, no, just as me, someone looking at history and having I'm on a bit of a policy wonk, so I look at this stuff. Um, I think that would bring up quite an interesting discussion. Ultimately, if we got to it, we'll have to wait and see what happens, because that the question to ask the question will be in October. So I guess we'll see what happens then. But as for the issue of immigration and remigration, I think I know where you're coming from. I think you could make a better argument. Um, but that's because, again, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of systems. For instance, who are the people who are most adversely affected when you bring in um, X number of temporary foreign workers, uh, and new permitted residents to come into Canada? In a lot of instances, they, like any other country, you find them in the working class areas and lower middle class, because that's where the most affordable housing can be found. This is why we're suffering a housing crunch, because all the affordable properties in these areas have experienced an overwhelming excess of people into it. There's not enough availability in the market.
And international investment, which a lot of smart countries don't allow.
That's right. There is that too. There is that too. But having said that, the people who are continuing this are suffering a spot of NIMBYism, not in my backyard,
Mhm.
because they have the social and financial clout and capital, and in their heritage neighborhoods. They can petition city municipalities and say, no, we don't want to have zoning change the overall traffic layout feel of our very ancient and elitist neighborhoods. So their experience, they push for immigration. They feel wonderful about it, very diverse. They meet these people in professional settings, right? And don't actually have to live with the consequences. Cheek by jowl, can't find doctors. It feels in some areas
I
a little bit
would,
shantytownish. So I mean, these are actual things, metrics that can be argued at the government to make real headway.
yeah, I'd just argue to that I don't think any of that is honestly genuine. I think too many Canadians give these people an out in the fact that they say they're stupid or they don't know what they're doing or they're too well intentioned. They're caught up in their liberal sensitivities, what have you. I think it is deliberate. It's purposeful, and they are gaming our liberal mindset to the advantage of their agenda. I just push back on that. Um, but I don't think you were finished because you were talking about the purposes of remigration and migration. Where did you want to bring that to a head in your point?
Oh well, the no, look at I'm gonna have to agree. There are going to be some in that element who know exactly what they're doing, but I suspect by and large we've got uh, some ideological capture going on because we're talking about people who need to feel a sense of belonging. They like to be part of fashionable causes, right? It allows them to have
Useful idiots,
status.
as I
Yeah,
call them. It's not charitable, but
yeah, it allows them to have some status, right?
yeah.
All of these things factor into them. You can't really, say that it doesn't play a role. It does. Um, but so they might be going along with this just cause. But yes, there will be elements that are going to be pushing the envelope on this. The other thing, of course, is enforcement. We do actually have laws about migration, term limits. We need our services to actually enforce them. And if the government isn't, that's certainly something that you also can press back on at that. And as Joe mentioned in the CTT space the other night, you can always vote with your wallet. In fact, that actually
That's a big
happened.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually happened at Pride Week this past. Was it this past weekend? I think it was. Where the Toronto Pride Festival, of course, is, I mean, it's huge. It's the largest in North America. It's the second largest in the world. And for 2 years in a row, they've had corporate sponsors withdrawing support. And that's because there have been issues with kink showing up at the pride parades. You can't make a claim for it being a family-friendly event if if you have that going on, and that makes it dangerous then for corporate sponsors to be involved because the feedback they get when they see their brand posted next to pictures of questionable stuff, that tends to have people writing in uh, fairly strongly, saying we're going to withdraw support. We're not buying your brand. We'll switch to something else. So there is that the ability to vote with your wallet. I know that the announcement of Dunkin' Donuts coming up to Canada is forced Tim Hortons into a position where they had to issue a statement. I can say that Krispy Kreme is excellent. There's only one here in Calgary, but that's
Too
that.
rich for my blood. I was never could get behind Krispy Kreme. It was just calorie bombs, man.
Oh, I know, I know. Well, look, it as a rare treat. Like I've had one, and I'm good for a year now. But
Yeah,
you know,
that's
but
about right.
exactly. But the thing is, they do one product and you do it extremely well. So if you have a choice and you're in the area, right, and you want to vote with your wallet to show your displeasure, that is an option, and that's the thing, right? The economy can help sort of self-correct some of this as well. It's not like these companies come in blind. They know exactly what the locations they need to be at. They get a feel for the land, and certainly they want to make the best impression possible. So we'll see. Change doesn't necessarily always have to happen in a political arena. Sometimes it can happen a little slower just simply by people exercising their ability to choose in other ways.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because I kind of want to bring this to a point where maybe I can get from you some insight into where you believe personally um, you see a successful conclusion within the bounds of your own ideology. Now, as a classic liberal, where are you placing your faith to right this ship? And I know that Canada is broken. I know that you know most of the reasons why. I don't necessarily think that we've come to the same conclusions why those things are broken. I heard you say a couple of things that I didn't really agree with, but I understand that that was your perspective in explaining what you just did. But as a classic liberal, or wherever you feel yourself drifting to in the moment right now, define how you feel our path to success and and getting this back for Canada is, or are you comfortable with this drift, this I guess this new zeitgeist, and where it's taking us? I know as the author and the host of Zeitgeist, you're probably wanting to see, obviously, my opinion, the opinion of any of the other guests that you have on your show on what they feel. But knowing you as I do, and as a first episode, it might be interesting to hear what you think from your classic liberal perspective and how you feel we we get this back.
That's an interesting question. Oh, okay. Look, as a classic liberal, I'm not beholden to any particular political dogma.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. So when I look at the lay of the land and what I'm watching for is what people, on the whole, seem to be reacting to. And I think that's important. And I don't mean the artificial influencers out there drumming up support. We all know who they are. I look for the things that indicate that there is definitely a shift going on. The biggest one, of course, and this is why I mentioned the Toronto Pride Festival, when you have major sponsors like Adidas or Clorox or you name it pulling out, that's not a small thing. These are major international companies. So they've had enough feedback from the general public that there is change is happening. And it may not necessarily always show up big. It starts with small things. And that's kind of what I'm watching for. And it's why it's important to me to ask people questions, get every now and then. Um, what do you see? Because what I see may not necessarily be the same. And let's face it, X is it's ruled by the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So some things might escape me. This is why it's worthwhile always to put the question out there in case I miss something.
Couldn't agree
Ev
more.
every perspective is valuable. Absolutely.
Do you not potentially subscribe some of this? And I don't mean this in a bad way. Is this not maybe a little bit of cope? Can you not maybe see that what we're seeing with people backing off? Okay, for example, there is tactical purpose, real tactical gain behind removing power from the culturally exhausted left in the political world, and noting that populism is on the rise, and in order to control and circumvent it, you create faux populists and start throwing the cultural influence behind the right to show that they're gaining traction, keep them on the hamster wheel, keep them within the plantation politics and backing these faux populists who are still really ultimately going in the same direction. See, I liken Canadians in their and almost all citizens in the West as the little kid sitting in the passenger seat with the plastic wheel. He thinks he's driving the car. He's hammering on the horn. He's turning right and left, and Dad tries to accommodate as much as he can, but ultimately they're not controlling the car. So boiling the frog, when it's like, okay, there's too much LGBTQ, we're creating too much resistance, these people are backlashing, they're going to absolutely shun our ideology unless we kind of back off this a bit and kind of try to embrace something a little bit more and ease the pressure off while continuing course. Do you see where maybe this isn't what you might identify the purpose being?
Oh, hey, listen, I absolutely do take that into account. I see that more at the political level, but I'm not saying that it can't potentially happen elsewhere. Although I think corporate sponsors might be a bit far. There has been largely backlash in a number of areas, including Bud Light and Hollywood box
Yes.
office tickets. So there is an actual customer feedback loop happening. So I can't chalk that up necessarily all to
But
subterfuge and power,
but
but
on that note,
mhm.
sorry, I want to keep it, I want to just push back on that. Have you not seen over the course of the last 10, 15, let's say 10 years, that Hollywood is making these horrendous movies pushing the message and are absolutely getting hammered to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars? The kind of shit where you don't get a sequel. Not only do you not get a sequel, you never touch that genre again. But they keep pressing. These people are losing money hand over fist. A real business doesn't tolerate that and corrects course. A fake business that is serving a greater purpose outside of money keeps Kathleen Kennedy making Star Wars movies. You have to look deeper at this. Do you not see that?
Well, I have seen that. If you'd asked me, would if you'd asked me rather than making a statement, I certainly could have offered that up. Yes, I do know billions of dollars. Disney actually is especially astonishing considering its reputation, but that means that it's being supported or backfilled. The losses are somewhere, right, by some company,
Exactly.
possibly BlackRock,
Exactly.
possibly State Street. Could be any of
Yeah,
them. I mean, but those
I
big
agree.
those large companies have literally their fingers in everything. So it wouldn't surprise me at all, but the thing is, what they can lose all the money, they can shore up poor, films as much as they want, but when a real alternative makes itself known, it's gonna catch like wildfire. It's gonna be
Yes.
inspirational because it's going to be so different and revolutionary, for lack of a better way of putting it, than this, you know, message that they've been trying to put out for, yeah, the better part of 10 years. I mean, there hasn't been a franchise they haven't wrecked yet, especially
Right.
Tron. I was so
Oh, you and
oh,
me both.
I
I
you know,
love Tron.
so do I, and, I just couldn't Tron Ares,
God,
I
we're
on
old.
on the day of I went to see it, I came back, I retweeted, "You had 1 job."
Yeah.
Like, seriously, there is only Tron and Tron Legacy. That's it. But,
I'm just curious on a completely other note. What didn't you like about the new movie? I didn't think it was terrible.
he had facial
I
hair.
mean, well, okay. Well, they did that in the first one, in the second one too. Okay, so here's the thing: if you understand Tron and the perception of what the programs look like in the machines, it's within the bounds of the machine's power to render graphics and to
I
create. So,
I know.
so so these terribly, so having facial hair and stuff like that just means that we're better at creating our virtual reality. Our machines are more powerful. Was that really it? Was just the graphical representation
No,
of the
no. I mean, look
computer
at
world?
I overall, I think Jared Leto did a really great job of holding that film up, all things considered. Uh, was not expecting the character to be portrayed that way. Let's put it that way. Um, it was also a bit of a Mary Sue thing. Girl goes in, saves
There's a
everything.
lot of that today, yeah.
There's a lot of that. I mean,
Oh God.
eh, it's overdone.
Don't worry, there's a smart liberal woman that will save us all our stupid men. We can't figure anything out. That is the fucking theme of every movie you can watch. That is exactly what happens. And it's a damn tragedy. And I know it even pisses women off.
Oh, it does absolutely. It's like, my God, we don't have to be the hero of every film. It's boring.
There's a TV show I'm watching right now. It's called For All Mankind. And it is a interesting show. It is an alternative universe where the Soviets landed on the moon first. And it takes the story from that point forward all the way into the future of colonizing Mars. And the rise of feminism and women in the workplace. And I'm telling you, by the time you get to season 3, women run the fucking world. They are in charge of NASA. They are the head of every government. They're the only ones who can negotiate. They're the engineers that are building the rockets, and all the men are just like surrounding them, picking their nose, and with no clue of what to do without these strong women, these Mary Sues leading the way, right down to a climax scene where a woman gets in a wrestling match with a man who has the surprise on her, and she ends up winning. It's like they can't. It's like, come on, can we just? It's a good story otherwise, to be completely honest. I just wish it could get out of its own way with the ideology.
Yeah, I can't. I'm at the point now where I'm watching anything on my DVD collection, and as long as it's more than 10 years old, I'm golden.
Smokey and the Bandit, throw it in, let's go. Right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
good, the bad, and the ugly, fistful of dollars,
Right.
$2 more, you got it.
Jesus. Yeah. Well, here, let me lay it down to you like this because I want to. I asked you about classic liberalism, and I know that you're the host, but can I tell you why I feel this classic liberalism and this liberal democracy ultimately will fail?
Yeah, you certainly can.
Not because I wanted to, but because, like I said, I'm just seeing the forest for the trees. All right. So, classic liberalism, as you know, advocates for individual rights, limited government, free markets, and spontaneous order. Sounds noble in theory, but in practice, it actually wastes, as we talked about. And I was saying, right? It proves unsustainable without a strong founding core. So, number one, here's where I think it fails and how it gets gamed. It assumes people are interchangeable. It treats humans as blank slate individuals who will somehow naturally converge on shared values. The reality is different people bring different fertility rates, different trust levels, cultural priorities, and then they flex those in their politics. And then you get instability, right? Number two, it undermines and underestimates the reality of tribalism, which is a natural aspect of human life. Liberals, I feel, believe rational self-interest and markets will override a group's identity. History, I think, shows the absolute opposite. Okay, like when groups compete for resources and power, blood and culture always win. It has no defense against capture. Because without a strong national identity, institutions are easily hijacked by these globalist elites and corporations for their own ideological interests. I mean, an example, look at post 1960 Western liberal democracies that opened borders, offshored industry, and promoted mass immigration while native populations declined, right, under their banner of progress and freedom. And lastly, well, actually, not lastly, I could think of one more. I'd say it wastes the nation's greatest asset, And that, in my opinion, is cohesion. High trust, homogenous societies, right? Like Japan, South Korea, historically European nations ultimately deliver stability, low crime, long term planning. I think that radical liberalization and individualism uh, and the diversity experiment trades that cohesion for short term GDP and moral signaling. And none of those things lend to the actual sustaining of a nation. And ultimately, if a nation is to serve its people and not GDP, and not just for the purposes of feeling good about itself, because that doesn't win the Darwinistic lottery either. Uh, Taking care of your people wins every time. Liberals end up axiomatically resulting with atomization, loneliness epidemics, and political paralysis. No one is agreeing on anything because it's all driven by virtue. And lastly, I'd say it has no answer to our current demographic reality. I feel that classic liberalism offers no mechanism whatsoever to protect the founding people's majority status. Low native fertility, high immigration equals irreversible transformation. I mean, we went from 90% European stock to 70% just in a couple decades, with projections showing that continuing to accelerate. So, civic values alone, civic nationalism alone, cannot hold a nation together once the core is so deeply diluted as ours is, which is why extreme times require extreme answers. So, my bottom line is this: classical liberalization works beautifully inside a high trust society, and it did in the past, at least from my perception. It certainly wasn't bad enough for me to notice anything, which is why I stayed blissfully ignorant as long as I did in my life. Maybe you're the same. Um, you know, the cultural cohesion of the people that practice it um, allowed it to endure. But when that people are deliberately dissolved, replaced, it becomes a suicide pact, in my opinion, that's dressed up as some sort of virtuous enlightenment. Because ultimately, liberty without strength is just it's it's managed decline. You have nothing to hold on to. There is no center. So
The problem is that Canada has always been pluralistic between the British winning the war and France having to capitulate and the Indigenous. We have never had, at our very legal foundation, we have never had a homogeneous society. We don't even have a national religion. We couldn't because we had a significant number of French Roman Catholics. And the reason we are suffering this issue of multiculturalism that's built on that is because when Quebec was pursuing its separatist agenda and Pierre Trudeau was trying to work and accommodate with that, they brought in official policy within a bilingual framework. Okay. And in order to keep the other communities happy beyond strict biculturalism, which actually it should be triculturalism if you want to incorporate the Indigenous, because they are a significant factor legally, right, in courts, then they had to recognize the contributions of other groups. So that would be the other larger populations or significant Ukrainian, Italian, German in the earlier waves. It is because we have tried to do the right, virtuous thing right from the get go. And let's face it, when it came to the royal proclamation, King George III didn't really have the income to take on a land insurgency from the Indigenous who were capable of organizing and wielding a lot of damage. So we are at the mercy of things that were put in place a very long time ago. And how we'll resolve that, I don't know. I'm interested to see. But part of that is Canadians have to understand that that's where some of the roots of these things are in the first place. But anyway, We're getting on to almost 9 o'clock. I said we'd chat for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. We're pushing 2 hours here, Wolf. I don't want to keep you all night long. I mean, I love chatting with you, but
I love
I mean, I
chatting with
gotta
you too.
I gotta let you, go and have a coffee or something.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap it up here at the top of the hour if you don't, if that'd be
For
fine.
sure.
I can hang on until then and we can end this eloquently. But I would say you're right. Um, the Christian, uh, what do you call it? The Catholicism versus the Protestantism. Um, sure, you can call that uh, pluralism, but I think if you were asking people most honestly who aren't deeply religious, they would consider all European faiths, even hell, Greek and Russian Orthodoxy, to be very much of the same cut. I mean, we all value Christ, we all accept Christ, uh, we all have the same general principles. It's really the practice that sets them apart and the focus, not so much the virtue. So I don't really see it that way. I think an ethno-European heritage and and the faith of Christianity is very much the foundation of that culture and of that society, and it has been from the beginning. I don't see. I would agree that Canada's got an interesting pedigree from the fact that from its inception, like let's be honest, the English didn't have to do that with the French. They had them beat. They didn't have to allow them to be self-governed. They didn't have to allow them to maintain their language or even their religious freedoms at that point. And there was very little that they could have done to stop them. It was very gracious of them, and it was a way to move forward within the nation. But it was also, honestly, I guess, a reckoning of the moment. Both of these nations were the final victors of North American soil. And at the running up prize, I guess, for the French were okay, you can be here too. You can have your place and you can do it your way. But we get the final say. And as far as the natives go, the indigenous population, far less of them. Let's just be honest. These people punch well above their weight and have been doing so for a ridiculous amount of time. This We should have either given them their own place where they could do what they want to do in perpetuity, or given them what we needed or what they wanted that was reasonable to end this discussion once and for all and to put this all to rest. The fact that we keep revisiting this has become a deep manipulate, just like the French and their politics with Ottawa. It's manipulation in perpetuity for the purposes of gaming the system against the rest of us. So that is a complication, but I'm totally okay squaring it with those three powers. Everyone else, I mean, except for, of course, the Scottish and the Irish who came here, and a lot of the founding ethno-European stock, which is what I always refer to Canadians as. Um, if you're not a heritage Canadian and you're coming here, there are rules, there are expectations. We have a way of doing things. You have a choice. Live, adapt, and show respect for our way of life, or GTFO. There is a huge difference between a assimilating migrant and an economic migrant who comes here for the purposes of making money, does not value your society, does not value your culture, wants to be no part of it. They just want to carve out for themselves in their own ethnicity and their own homeland, their own portion of your pie. I'm not down for that.
Well, I think that might actually be something that the Americans got correct. If you come to America, become an American citizen, that's it. You're an American. And it does not mean that there aren't Italian Americans or, Greek Americans or whatever, that you can still have your little, um, delineation, you know, he heritage, whatever you wanna call it. But overall, everybody's grateful who comes into the States. Generally has been. I don't know about so much lately. But traditionally, it has been once they make it there, they're very grateful for the opportunity. They become exceptionally good probably more zealous, patriotic citizens than some of the people who grew up there and sort of, um, may not appreciate because they don't we have a privilege, after a fashion with our geography. A lot of the things that you see in the rest of the world don't touch us here
But
directly,
but isn't the truth
and
of
I think
that
we forget about that.
but isn't the truth of that belied by the fact that they call themselves, for example, African Americans? I mean, you're an American. If you truly see it that way, then you're an American. Sure, you're black, but you're an American. You're not an African America. Point of fact, most people in Africa cannot fucking stand African Americans at all. They have no patience for them. They think they're some of the worst people you can imagine. I'm not saying that to be mean or cruel, but it's just like Quebecers aren't really Parisian French, are they? Like they could barely understand each other now. The drift is so bad. And they don't have anything really in common beyond their ancestry. So wouldn't it just be if America was this great melting pot, wouldn't it be enough to just say I'm an American? Why constantly this deference to their origins? Because I agree with you. America is powerful. They got a great economy. Their way of life is like you come here with an idea and a work ethic, you can make it. All you need to do is commit yourself to to the ideology of Americanism and individualism and contribute to the whole. And because there's so much history in fighting for building this experiment, it pulls people in. But there's so many Americans today who aren't truly American. They hate the country while reaping its benefits.
Well, a lot of that is, much thanks to the influence of the 1960s and 70s, the civil rights revolution.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, there was a lot of other stuff going on in the background there that perhaps people weren't aware of. Um, but having said that, look, when I was growing up, because of course, you can't grow up in Canada without having bleed over of American media into your living room.
absolutely.
It just is what it is. And for the longest time, I think up until about very late 90s, early 2000s, if you were an American, you were American. That was it. And, you'd see little pockets here and there. But even if you went into, say, the Italian quarter, or whatever, they were staunchly American Italian roots. They talk about their Italian roots back in Sicily, right? But extremely proud to be in the United States and have that privilege. And, that's something kind of unique. I don't think we have you've dealt with a lot of migrants, more probably intimately than I have. Was that ever your experience that they were exceptionally proud to be here and Canadian?
No. Let me amend that. There are yeah. So I think in the course of our immigration policy, there was a time we brought people here who genuinely wanted to be a part of this nation and when came for all the right reasons. I know that's true throughout the West. I know it's one of the reasons why the United Kingdom has such a fair opinion of Indian migration because the Indians who came there uh, from the old days uh, really assimilated, became very English in their own right, and over a couple, two, three generations, were virtually beyond color of skin, unrecognizable in the way they acted and felt and thought about things. They assimilated perfectly. The new Indians who are coming here, they have this expectation, but the problem is the new immigration policies don't uphold the same principles. So the people who are coming here they're not the same quality. They're not here for the same purposes. They don't have the intention uh, of doing anything more than gaming the system and getting what they can. And it's reflected in the experience. Like myself growing up, I was very, very multicultural, as I've explained, and I have a value. I really do like other cultures. I think true diversity is in nationalism, because the preservation of every society in the world, every nation, every pure place where these people exist is a beautiful thing. And then if they want to go somewhere else because they feel that that's where their calling is and they're willing to play by the rules and be an asset to that place and then join their society, brings the responsible migration and uh, and beauty that immigration can offer. And it remains true, because that those people will stay there for 2-3 generations, and then you won't even recognize them. 4 generations later, they're telling you that they're Japanese, and you're like, "What? Really? Oh yeah, yeah. My great great grandma came here from Japan, and she did this and that, and yeah, I'm totally Canadian." Oh, okay. Well, that's amazing. That's the way it's supposed to work. But if everyone just throws it all to the wind and we all just come and go as we please, then there is no purity to any race. There is no purity to any culture or nation. None of it matters anymore. And thus, there is no tradition, there is no heritage. Nothing means anything. I often equate it to throwing all the spices from your spice cabinet into a pot. You can do that one time and you'll get what you get, but there's no going back from that. That's why we keep our spices separate in the cabinet, so you can create unique and interesting dishes whenever you want. Sometimes you want a little more garlic, sometimes you want none. Sometimes you like onion. That, to me, is the true diversity and the true beauty of the world. We are about 10% of the population of the world. When they keep talking about diversity in Western nations that are being bred out, what's left? Where's our place in the world? They tell us, go back to Europe. That's your place. If you want that, you stole land. Okay, well, what's happening in Europe right now? It doesn't seem to be theirs either. So where is, our place? I know I kind of veered off there. What I just simply mean to say is, I think immigration, responsible immigration, is beautiful. I think it's advantageous. I think you can bring smart engineers in and people who have truly suffered but feel akin to what you're building and want to be a part of what you are building and want to join you. I have no pity for economic migrants. I don't even have pity for asylum seekers who fucking window shop for where they want to end up. I'm sorry. If your mud hut is being flooded out and you're surrounded by warlords, go to the next state where your mud hut is dry and not surrounded by warlords. Across the world and look for, a free handout in a nation a world away that you have nothing in common with, just because you're going to get more. That's not responsible to the indigenous population, and it's not really a fair representation of immigration, even to these other people. I think we have lost the plot. I think we need to regain control of our nations. I think we need to reprioritize the core of our nations. This is why, as what I is a civic nationalist, now must respect and even uh, uphold the right to voice and the point of notice of ethno-nationalists, because we've gone too far. We've gone too far. We need to prioritize ourselves once more. We need to recenter ourselves. It's not out of hate, and it's certainly not out of exclusion. It's because if we can't help ourselves, like God says, pull the log out of your own eye so you can see clearly enough to pull the splinter out of someone else's. You can't help the world. You can't be an asset to the world if you yourself are not centered and have a good nation. So I know I took that way off into the weeds there because I just feel like we're getting close to the end there. But um,
We are
did
getting
that
close.
did that answer what you asked, or did I miss it?
Oh no, I was just when you mentioned sending Canadians back to Europe, I can only imagine what the Europeans might think if they had 18 million irate Canadians showing up all at
Right?
once. They remember World War II. That could get interesting. But
Yeah. And the flip side of that is too, by there's been throughout history many examples of successful remigration, and that have happened to the tunes of tens of millions. Now, again, please understand, I'm not like some of these other people that you may have heard, where I think if you're not born here for 3, 4 generations, you don't belong. I still believe there is room in Canada for the proper kinds of migrants that we have. But all of the visa overstayers, all the abusers, all the economic migrants, all of the criminals and fraudsters, they need to go. And that's a great place to start. And then we need to reinvigorate civics. We need a moratorium. We need to reinvigorate civics. We need to remind Canadians that they have a prideful history, to be proud of it, to know their history, and expect others to want to be to be a part of that, to learn our language, learn our ways. They chose to be here, right? I've literally heard people telling me that I should learn how to speak Chinese in order to accommodate Chinese people. I have a Chinese friend. I argue with her about this, and I say, you know what? If I want to learn how to speak Chinese, I'll go to China, and I'll because I want to be a part of their economy and I want to do business with them or whatever for whatever reason. But I live here. I don't need to speak Chinese, you know? And the fact that migrants think this way shows you how much we've betrayed ourselves, because ultimately, if you don't respect yourself, if you don't respect your home, if you don't love your home, how the fuck are you ever going to expect them to respect you and appreciate you and take you seriously, which they should, right? You can't pull this shit in the East. You can't go to Korea, tell Koreans how it's going to be. If you're in Korea and you break the law, the Korean the Korean judiciary will almost always land on the side of the native Korean. That might seem completely unfair, but they're looking out after their own. They're taking care of their own. That is the natural state of the world. Only in the West do we not understand it and see it. We have diverged from reality, and we have had it too good for too long, and we have entered too much fantastical bullshit. Some of the stuff we hold on to and see as just our right, is absurd. You could be living so much worse than we do. So yeah, if we have to give up a few freedoms, and you got to give up your spiced latte at Starbucks to give back to your nation something, so be it. We've charged the account too much. It's time to start paying down the balance.
certainly something to think about for sure. It is after 9, and I
It
think I've
is.
probably kept you long enough.
That's okay.
But I won't
I
but
loved it.
I know. Well, I'm gonna have to have you back at some point, but,
I thought, what
I
could I talk about for an hour? Here we are 2 hours later. I'm not that
It's been a great.
interesting.
Oh, you absolutely are. It's great to have these conversations and not look, the advantage is the advantage with CTT is you get to hear from a lot of people, which means I have to be extremely concise, when I come up and briefly throw something out. This has been a great opportunity to really have a more long one-winded, it's probably not necessarily the right word to choose, but, a more leisurely,
Yeah.
dialogue, which is not an opportunity that comes up too often. So I really do
Long-winded would be
appreciate.
fair. You should do this with Joe too, because honestly, I'm serious. Joe is a very interesting. Over the last few seasons, the dynamic has changed a bit in CTT. But Joe is very much, in so many ways, absolutely the bedrock of CTT. And nothing happens without his consent, without his approval. Though we're partners in it, um, we don't move without the other. And there are a lot of times we disagree, but we see the value in that disagreement and moving forward. And we try to make sure that no matter what we decide, each other gets what we want out of the episode. Um, and we work it out. So, what I mean to say is, you're going to get something different from him than you get from me in these conversations. And you will see just how different we are and how awesome it is. People who don't see eye to eye on a lot of things and are completely different in a lot of ways work together so well.
Well, I absolutely will have Joe on at some point. I've met Joe. He's a wonderful
I know.
individual. So
Yeah.
yeah, the
I hear that all
opportunity
the
to
time.
yeah the opportunity to have him talk about what he sees as the spirit of the times will certainly be an interesting conversation. But you guys are okay. So normally CTT runs Tuesday and Fridays, 7 p.m. But you guys are going on holidays now, so you're onto the campfire.
Yeah.
How does
Yes.
that?
Okay.
What's the
How does it
schedule for that?
work?
Yeah.
All right. Well, it basically is just really quickly. So, under the new programming structure, we run 3 seasons per annual. Basically, it starts in the fall, closes down at Christmas. We start up after the new year with the second season of the strike package, and then it runs till Easter. Then, sometime after Easter break, we fire up the third the third campaign, the third arc, and we run it until summer. Then we close down for our long break, which is getting out and touching grass and honestly trying to encourage fellow X users not to be on their fucking phone doing this shit all the time and getting out there and being with their family, their friends, and enjoying the things they're fighting for. Right. So the Canada Campfire Talks, like I said in the promotion there the other night, is just simply to keep the fire lit. Joe really likes to keep the show rolling. We could have done nothing, but we feel the community still, wants a place to show up from time to time. And it's a much more laid back, loose thing. We run our episodic focus points. We run our seasonal arcs. This isn't that. This is much more traditional chat room kind of stuff. You come up, you show up, you talk about whatever you want to talk about. Doesn't matter. Go where conversation takes you. It's casual. It will run on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 p.m. if we decide. If we don't want to do it, we don't do it because we're on vacation. If we choose to do it and we're feeling froggy, we'll do it. And it might be Joe, it might be just me, or it could be both of us. It doesn't matter. We're keeping it light and casual. That is the purpose of Canada Campfire Talks. Instead of hearing you there, we will hear you here. Because the Jägmeister takes us out and around, but when we are in front of the fire, we are home where we are, in front of the fire, just having a conversation. So it's the inversion. CTT becomes CCT. Instead of hear you there, we hear you here. What do you
Excellent.
think?
I think
Very
that's
ridiculous,
excellent.
right?
No, it's perfect. I mean, it fits absolutely with the feeling of summertime where, if the weather is beautiful, well, yeah, of course, you're going to be out barbecuing and doing anything else except being at the computer screen. So, but fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Of course, I will be joining when I
I
see
hope
them
so.
pop up. I will absolutely, absolutely. I've been
I just want to quickly say Go on. No, go. Please finish.
I was gonna say I was gonna say I've been, listening to CTT since 2022. So,
Yeah,
you
this is
know,
before I was around.
um yeah, it's, I mean, it's great for Canadians to be able to get together and really thrash things out, what they see during in, day-to-day politics and whatnot. So, uh, I mean, it's a fantastic vehicle, and so
Well,
I'm really pleased to be able to come in and chat with you and Joe for sure, and have you here.
we have we have a fantastic community, and you're a very strong part of it. And I would just say I know that that arc was tough on you for reasons, um, but I'm glad you put your faith in us to represent the conversation, the topic well, and keep it grounded. It's very easy to allow that kind of shit to run away with you if you don't do it right. We
Are you there? Okay, have I got my speakers back? Okay, well, it seems like I don't know if this is still if anyone can hear me. If you can, put your thumbs up, thumbs down. Ah, okay. Oh, you can hear me? Okay. I can't hear anything. Well, I think I'm about to lose the space, but if that's the case, this is probably a good time to cut it off. Wolf, thank you very much for coming. And everybody else, thank you very much for listening. And we'll catch you all later.